you probably clicked on this video because you think, I want to use herbs at home. I want to know, can I use ginger? Could I use cinnamon? Could I use, turmeric? Could I use, what kind of herbs could I use? Could I use some, chrysanthemum tea? What kind of tea can I have? Self-help tips and things like that. Or even you want to go, no, I want to pop down to Chinatown and get my own herbs and just get rid of this dampness with my own herbs.
Nice.
Hi, welcome back to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. My name is Marie Hopkinson. I'm a Chinese herbalist and an acupuncturist. And today we're going to be talking about dampness and different kinds of herbs that you can use at home to help with dampness, and also how a Chinese medicine practitioner, a herbalist, might use herbs to treat dampness and how they would go about that and what the different strategies are. So there's several different strategies that herbalists can use to treat dampness, and it depends on the cause of the damp and the underlying patterns of disharmony that are going on in a person's body. So we're going to have a look at those things. Now, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Click that little thing at the bottom that says subscribe and a little notification bell, and that way you'll never miss a video from me. I want to welcome all the new subscribers and people that have been commenting and telling me that they're really enjoying the content and learning from it. If you're a student, then welcome. If you're a person that's having a treatment with an acupuncturist or a herbalist, this is the main purpose of this channel. This channel is for you. It's to help you understand Chinese medicine, get a little bit more in depth. And maybe you come across this video because you think, well, my Chinese medicine practitioner told me I have dampness. How can I help my dampness? And this is actually also responding to a subscriber's question. So they had made this comment. They said, Ray, can you do a video or can you talk a little bit about what herbs can I use to help with damp? So we're going to talk about the strategy first of different kinds of ways of looking at dampness, how a practitioner would go about that. And then we'll also talk about some herbs that you can use at home and things you can try, like food herbs or food things you can use. So welcome to the channel, and strap yourself in, grab a coffee or a tea, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to use a textbook. Usually I just talk out of my head, not out of this part of my head, not the other end. But I usually just talk off the top of my head and just give you stuff that it comes to mind about these kinds of conditions and different things that the way that we think about things in Chinese medicine. So I'm going to use this textbook, and this is a stock standard. This is an older version of what we call formulas and strategies, to give you a guide of how a Chinese herbalist would use different formulas in a TCM approach. So that's the traditional Chinese medicine. So the stock standard Chinese medicine herbalist that you would see. And I'll also talk a bit about what the different approach with classical Chinese herbal medicine is. Now, some of these stock standard formulas are classical herbal formulas, and we'll talk about that as well. So the first thing I want to say is you probably clicked on this video because you think, I want to use herbs at home. I want to know, can I use ginger? Could I use cinnamon? Could I use, turmeric? Could I use, what kind of herbs could I use? Could I use some, chrysanthemum tea? What kind of tea can I have? Self-help tips and things like that. Or even you want to go, no, I want to pop down to Chinatown and get my own herbs and just get rid of this dampness with my own herbs, with things over the counter. So you can purchase Chinese medicines over the counter, right? And so those things usually come in pills and sometimes maybe powders, but mostly pill form. And those things will have some kinds of like indication. So they might say this could or may be of use in indigestion, or it might say, this may help with headaches or something like that. Because there'll be some kind of traditional use. Now, I can only really talk about the legislation, the regulations in Australia, because I know a lot about that since I'm an Australian. You haven't worked that out already. But we do have one of the highest standards of regulations. Like, people call us the nanny state, right? In a way, like we have a lot of regulations around what we can and can't say about registered services. So what we're talking about now is a registered service in Australia, a registered service of Chinese herbal medicine, but also what can and can't be put on bottles, and that's called a therapeutic claim. And so there'll be lots of formulas that a herbalist might prescribe to you that won't have, if you were to purchase that formula over the counter, they wouldn't have the symptoms that you might have on the bottle, because that's not how they're allowed to be marketed, for one thing. And also it's not really how it's used in its best way, in an indication way. So what that means is a patient comes in to see me, let's say, and they say, oh, Marie, I have a foggy head, I have a cloudy head. Now that's a really big symptom of damp, like a common symptom of dampness. Now, where the dampness is might give you symptoms like you might have urination problems, right? So some people have, they're weeing a lot. They might have damp heat or damp cold or dampness in what we call the lower jowl or the lower part of your body. So from your umbilicus, your belly button downwards. For women, that might give them gynecological symptoms, like they might have thrush, or they might have like a discharge or something like that. They might be weeing a lot, or urinating a lot, going to the toilet a lot. And the urine might smell really strong. If it's in TCM, they call it damp heat, if the urine smells really strong. Or even could be burning. Now, in a Western medicine sense, that would be a urinary tract infection, a UTI. So you might go to a herbalist and they say you've got those symptoms, and they say, well, you've got damp heat in the lower jowl. That might be their diagnosis, and then they'll give you a formula. Now, wouldn't be able to go down and get that formula for those symptoms to work it out by yourself down at Chinatown. And you certainly wouldn't, or wherever your herbal medicines are sold. There might not be a Chinatown where you live. But in a retail version of a Chinese herbal medicine, there's some pharmacies and health food shops actually sell Chinese herbal medicines over the counter as well. And naturopaths also give these formulas out as well, these over-the-counter formulas, and they might use them in a different way, like to a Chinese herbalist. What I'm really getting at is the key of Chinese medicine, the real golden part of it, the most important part, is the diagnosis. And really that's what a Chinese herbal medicine practitioner goes to school to train for. That's what I went to school. That's what I went to Chinese medicine school for. That's why I then, after 4 years of study, I then went and did more study and did a 3 years just in Chinese herbal medicine in the particular style that I practice now. Again, on top of that, so like in total, I've done maybe more than 10 years of study in Chinese medicine based kind of things, including my master's degree. It'd be even more than 10 years of study. So I guess what I'm saying is it's a complicated thing that you can't just boil down to, oh, let me just know the formula, Marie, and tell me what herbs could treat my dampness, and then I'll go and get them and I'll use them. But I will, so the point of this channel is to help educate you so that you know you can get a bit more value for what you're getting out of your Chinese medicine practitioner. So if you're going and seeing a herbalist and you think, what are they giving me? These weird kind of, these little weird ingredients. I've got to boil this stuff up and take it. Or it might just seem like you might just want to know a little bit more about how it works. The purpose of this is not to give you the information so that you can go, right, oh yeah, Maria, here's my dampness herbs checklist. I'm going to go down and buy these from somewhere and start treating myself. That's not the reason for this video. And I would really advise you against that. One is because you could do damage. You could give yourself kidney damage or liver damage by taking too many herbs or overlapping herbs of the same type. It's not very common in Australia that people do that, but in China it's actually very common for practitioners it's very common for patients to go around knowing this knowledge of these herbs and asking practitioners, oh, can you prescribe me this, can you prescribe me that? And they actually end up having way too much of one particular herb, thinking that, hey, this is the longevity herb, or this is going to help my hair not go, help my hair not go grey, or something like that. So that's one reason why I would advise against you kind of doing that. So let's get into the topic and talk about the different ways of treating dampness and looking at dampness. So one way of treating dampness, I'm just going to go through some of the methods from this book, would be to promote urination. And sometimes the terminology might be to leach out dampness or to flush out dampness. So you can drain that damp through the urination. So what will happen when you take a formula like that is you'll usually wee a little bit more. And there might have been a reason why your urination was stuck or blocked before that happened. So like I said, that one of the symptoms with damp could be a urinary tract infection. And some patients that I see have they know when they're going to get something like that. And they might even have a running script with their doctor, with their GP, for antibiotics, because they just know, oh, look, I can feel this kind of coming on when I get stressed or when something happens. I can feel this happening. And so rather than waiting until they've got this full-blown urinary tract infection situation going on, then they take the antibiotics as almost not a preventative, but as a very early first use thing. And Chinese herbs work very well when you treat it like that as well, if you can really be aware of those first symptoms that you have. So sometimes what will happen with your bladder is, in Chinese medicine, we think cold can get in the bladder, And that cold kind of makes the bladder contract. And then what happens inside the bladder is what's in there. It kind of gets too warm, and that concentrates the urine. And so that means that the urine might then smell stronger because it's concentrated. So there's more like urea and the toxins that you want to be weeing out in there rather than water. So the water part kind of evaporates. And in a Chinese medicine sense, we call that like heating up. So the bladder's actually, even though cold caused it to happen, like there's now heat kind of in the bladder. And so when the person goes, they feel a sense of warmness. Like when they wee, before you actually have a urinary tract infection, let's say, or maybe the very start of it might be. I'm not sure whether Western medicine really acknowledges this symptom or not, but in Chinese medicine, we certainly think of this as an important symptom. Like when you go to the toilet, do you feel a sense of warmness, right? Now, you shouldn't be aware of your urine. Now, you'd never really feel your urine be cold, colder than your body, but you shouldn't feel it be warmer than your body. So if it is warmer than your body, then you'll know about it. Like you won't be going, oh, I'm not really sure. Like you'll know. And sometimes I ask patients questions about their symptoms, and then they come back the next time and they say, yeah, I thought about that, and I think I do have that, right? But something like this, it wouldn't be going on and on and on for a long time necessarily. It might just be something that recently happened. So at that very early stage, that person might feel a warmness. Now, if that was a UTI, they might then get a burning when they
Shawty fire burning on the dance floor.
had kidney stones or something like that as a diagnosis, then there could be, incredible pain when someone goes. And the danger of having a urinary tract infection in the bladder is that infection can go up the ureter and go up to the kidneys and cause a person to have a kidney infection. Now that's more severe. And sometimes patients who have this regularly, that's why they take the antibiotics quickly, because they do that. Now, you'll probably be familiar with this method of, like, let's say, promoting urination to get out the dampness, because that's what people naturally do when they have had a UTI. They will drink a lot of water. So they'll come in and say, oh, I'm trying to flush it out with the water, but that didn't work. So by simply drinking more and more water, you're kind of naturally weeing more, and so whatever's in there is kind of being flushed out. And things like cranberry juice and stuff like that are kind of working in that kind of antibacterial way, and that flushing out kind of way. So Chinese medicine works in that way as well. Now, we do that for dampness in that area for sure, but there are some formulas that might be used for other different presentations of dampness, which might work by flushing. And so you might have a whole formula, like a common formula that does this would be something called Wuling San, right? And so this is a formula that you would take for those kinds of urinary symptoms often. Like that a practitioner would prescribe to you for that time. And it wouldn't be something you'd take a long time. It'd usually be something you'd take for a week or 2 weeks or something like that. It wouldn't be a long-term formula. These kinds of things are for like really these acute situations, these recent situations. But the herbs inside that formula, they have that effect. So in that formula, there's lots of herbs together that kind of have that effect. But there's sometimes we use things like Fu Ling is a really popular Chinese herb, or a common Chinese herb, in lots and lots of formulas. And it has that effect. And in Western medicine, they call that a diuretic effect. It means it makes you urinate more. So that's one method of herbs, like to make you urinate more and to kind of promote urination and leach out the dampness, as he's kind of saying here. There's another variation of that, Juling tongue, which is another kind of more for when it's more hot in there. And then there's other formulas that kind of do a similar sort of thing. Like there's lots of different choices of formulas, is what I'm saying, that the practitioners could use. And it depends on their style of Chinese medicine as to how they use that. The next style of Chinese medicine that kind of gets rid of damp would be to transform the damp. And so this section says formulas that transform damp to turbidity. And so these formulas can be more aromatic, like that means like fragrantly sort of aromatic. And so you have a couple of common formulas. Pingwei San is a really popular herbal formula. Hoshang Zhangqi San is another one in that section. So if you're not sure what kind of herbal formulas you're taking, then the practitioner should be writing that on the bottle. If you're in Australia, they have to write the ingredients on there, like all the ingredients, and they have to write the name of the formula. So that's your right to have that on there. And if they're not doing that, then it's illegal for them not to be doing that. They're not following the AHPRA guidelines if they're not putting that information on the container. But there's lots of different regulations all around the world, and some practitioners don't put the name of the formula on the bottle or the ingredients in there for different reasons. Some practitioners are just too lazy to do it. They don't want to do it. Some practitioners think it might confuse patients more. Some practitioners are maybe scared that someone's going to steal their secret recipe and they don't want to disclose there's certain herbs that they've used. Particularly in China, this is one of the only ways you can have a proprietary is to keep something secret, right? To keep your secret recipe. So you'd never really let another practitioner know your secret sauce if you have a special formula, that you've used. However, what can happen is if a person has an adverse reaction to something, they don't know what it is it the herbs, is it something else, or they have an accident and the surgeon wants to know, well, what are you taking in case you're taking something that might be considered a blood thinning medication or something like that. Like you should have access to what you're consuming, what you're taking. That's just a side note, that's just for free. So these kind of formulas are really aromatic, and I'm going to see if I can find something on the shelf here that's one of those kind of formulas. This is a herb called Kungju, and this is like going to be a tight lid. It's very strong when you smell it. I wish you could smell it through the internet. But this herb is kind of very, there's Kungju and there's Baiju. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that Kungju. Now, what it is actually like is a little sponge. Now, this is a more drier version of a herb called Baiju. And I have got Baiju, but it's cut up so small that you won't be able to see it so well. So Kungju and Baiju are common herbs that kind of act in this way. So lots of Chinese medicine is metaphorical, okay, if you haven't figured that out already. Hello, this is a different system to Western medicine. And we think of this herb, it's very dry and sticky, it's acidic, we think of it in a way like a sponge. It kind of gets in there and it soaks up the damp and it helps your body repurpose the water that it needs to. And so Baiju and Kungju are similar, but Kungju's more for when there's the more dampness there is, the more we would use that Kungju rather than Baiju. Atractylodes is the name of the plant, right? So lots of these formulas are aromatic, right? What that means is it smells so strong. They smell fragrant and they kind of have that uplifting nature. Now, I might have mentioned this on the channel before, but if you're looking for home tips and things you can use at home, anything that smells aromatic. Now, you don't necessarily want to make a person sweat a lot with aromatic, pungent, hot spices, but things that are aromatic have an uplifting effect. They move things outward and upward. And the nature of damp is to sort of sink and be heavy and sink down. So it makes sense that you want things that are uplifting and aromatic. So Kungju and Baiju are kind of not herbs you would use in cooking. I've used Baiju a little bit, but it's not really, the taste isn't so great. And also they're hard to get hold of. You'd need to go to a herbalist to be able to get these herbs to cook with. And you certainly wouldn't want to drink it as a tea. It's not a delicious tea tasting thing. But something that is really nice is a herb called Chen Pea, right? So Chen Pea is the citrus peel, and that is you can kind of get a little do a little experiment at home and make your own kind of citrus peel tea and use that in different things. So all you need to do is get your mandarin or your orange. Chen Pea's mandarin peel, I think, but orange peel is also used, and that's called Qing Pea, Qing. And so both of these will have a similar effect for dampness and for moving qi, moving stagnation. So Chen Pea is often used for stagnation, like liver, what in TCM call liver qi stagnation. So people that are kind of sighing a lot, a bit stressed, a bit stagnant, and what inevitably happens from that stagnation is then, well, dampness can happen too, because you need kind of a flow, you need things moving. So Chen Pei kind of is an aromatic, opening, uplifting herb, and that's something you can easily make yourself. So you can just get that orange peel or that mandarin peel next time you have one, save all the peel and just break it up into little pieces. Pieces about that size is okay. And then you just dry it. So either if you've got an air dryer, you could put it in that. Like a dehydrator, you could put it in something like that. You could put it in the oven and dry it. So you want it to kind of a low temperature. If you live in a very hot, dry climate, like I live in Perth, Western Australia, and when it's summer, it can be 40 degrees and you can cook an egg on the pavement. It's so hot, right? And it's not humid here. So you can't do this stuff if you don't have a dry environment. If you've got a humid, hot environment, what will happen to when you try to dry your herbs out like that is they'll go moldy, or they won't dry properly. So that's when you need an oven to kind of do that. So if you're cooking something else, let's say you've got a big oven, you're cooking up a roast or something, and you're having that oven on for a long time, then you could just put a little tray of your peel, like to dry it out in there. And then once it's dry, you can store that in a jar or something like that. So I like to store my herbs in these jars. But you can store them in any kind of airtight container, so that it's nice to have them in the jar so you can see it. But some herbs tend to attract more bugs to them, and if you have them in the light all the time, then they'll get more bugs in them. But Chen Pei tends to not have a lot of bugs. That tends to be okay. So you can just make your own, and you can try that. And what you could do with that is then you make a little tea out of it. So you just pour some hot water over it, and you want to smash it up into smaller pieces once it's dried. You can powder it if you want, but you wouldn't need to really powder it to make it into a tea. And you can cook with it. You can use it in the same way you'd use something like a lemon rind. So that'll have a similar effect, not exactly the same. But, the rind of a lemon's got that really tart kind of taste. Now, lemon rind is a lot more sour, and that has a different effect for damp than this pungent aromatic effect of the dried peel. So try some dried mandarin peel. You can make your own so you can either use mandarin, orange, or tangerine to kind of do this kind of thing as a home remedy. And you can make a tea to kind of drink like that. Another strategy of herbal medicine treatment is formulas that clear damp heat. And this would be through the bowels usually. So what will happen is if you have damp heat in your lower area, like your lower jowl, jowl just means kind of area, you could have it in the bladder, and you would use those formulas we talked about first. But if you didn't have it in the bladder, you could have like a dysentery kind of situation where you've got like extreme diarrhea. Gastro would be gastroenteritis, or in Australia we just call it gastro. I got the gastro. So if you've got gastro and you're going frequently to the toilet and you've got a hot feeling when you go, like it's very smelly and it's hot, or you've got burning downstairs, burning when you go, then that's usually a sign of damp heat in Chinese medicine. So those kinds of formulas might give that bowels a little bit of a purge, but only as a small strategy to kind of purge it out, and then we give you something else after that, usually to help your body recover. And so there's some formulas in a classical Chinese medicine sense. If a person was strong and robust and they had that gastro, then we might give them a purging formula to kind of purge it out, make them go a bit more, get it all out, and then give them something else. Or if they were a really deficient kind of person, a practitioner might give them something else to just kind of stop the diarrhea and help them keep water in their body. So you have to be very careful if a person's got diarrhea, whether it's hot or not hot diarrhea, but they've just got loose stools. Even if they've eaten something, like they've had food poisoning, this could be a reason why this could happen. Like barley belly would be another thing. I don't know where you're from, if you've ever heard of that. But, Bali, Indonesia is very close to Australia, and people always, say, oh, I got barley belly when I went over there. So because they're not used to the food, or they basically had a food poisoning or something like that situation happen. Or maybe from the bacteria and the bugs in the water or something like that. And so this is where I'm getting at, like, it's really important that you see a practitioner rather than just try to do this on your own. And I want to make this video to kind of show you how complex it is for a practitioner to kind of work out, well, what's the right formula for that patient. Because if a person's losing a lot of fluids, you don't necessarily want to make them lose any more by purging them out, right? like a cleanse. Like if someone did a cleanse, they can sometimes often feel really bad and feel really tired and worse because they've made their bowels work so hard and they've lost even more fluid. So if you're vomiting as well, then be very careful about what herbs you take. I wouldn't do anything over the counter. Go and see a practitioner and get them to kind of prescribe something to you. And if you're a regular patient, like if I have regular patients that will call me up and they'll say, "Oh, Marie, I'm too sick to come in because they're just, vomiting all the time, or they're like sick like that." Then I can usually give them the herbs like over a phone consult because I know that patient, I've felt their pulse before, those kinds of things. So it's really valuable if you've been to a herbalist before, that you've got that relationship, you've got that rapport with them, that you can say, "Hey, if I got sick worse, could I have a phone consult with you," or something like that. And that's usually most practitioners will do that for you if they know you already. So that's one style of formulas kind of does that. And often these formulas that clear damp heat can also involve herbs that are very aromatic as well. So they're designed to kind of get things moving. A good example would be, I'll read out a couple of formula names, San Ren Tang. And so this would be, a person that got sick with that gastro kind of situation, something that would maybe be, in Chinese medicine we call this considered like a warm disease. And so that means they got sick from the warm weather. Now what can happen in that warm weather is often bacteria and bugs are growing in those warm, damp environments, right? So if people don't have good hygiene or something like that, and that's where these kind of barley belly things kind of come from. Like we have no idea how much disease we're kind of saved from in countries like Australia, the US, UK, just because of sanitation and hygiene and things like that. And you're just not surrounded by these things as often, right? So this formula is San Ren Tang, and this has got things like Xing Ren, and Hopo, Bansha, and so it's got some herbs that are cooling in it, or can be considered cooling, huasha, for that heat part of the situation. But some of those herbs like Hopo is really aromatic, and so it's kind of got a little bit of cooling the heat, but it's also uplifting in that area. Now this is not a video for students. It's not enough information. I'm not teaching you about how these formulas work. It's a very, very broad kind of overview about just so you get the basics. This is a video for patients who are just interested in knowing about how things work. And again, there's some of these formulas that use, a lot of these formulas kind of in this category use those aromatic herbs. And then there's some that have a much more directly purging aspect. So that's designed to kind of make you move your bowels, get it out, and then we'll deal with what's next. So after that formula, after a purging formula, then we'd often give you something that helps kind of like restore your system and help you retain fluids and nourish your body basically after that. And that's a really important, I think, people forget how important that is in Chinese herbal medicine, how big of a part that is in how we think about treating patients in a sequential order of like, okay, we've done this and this is, had this effect, and now we do something else, and then we do something else. And it kind of, the idea is to restore that patient back to their health rather than just going, oh, here's one formula for this thing. It's not an indication-based medicine. It's an individual-based medicine. It's like, well, this patient needs this now, but then after they've taken that, what next do they need? What next do they need? It doesn't mean you have to take herbs forever. You're not supposed to be on Chinese medicine forevermore in a day, but it is a system that should have the capacity to help you restore you back to health, and really understanding that, yeah, there can be detriment from taking formulas. There can be detriment from taking Western medicines and formulas, like just how Western medicine has antibiotics that are really cold. Chinese herbal medicine has some herbs that are really cold, and should they be needed, like if a person had a really high fever or they had lots and lots of heat symptoms, like they had that toxic, like in Chinese medicine called toxic heat, they had all that stuff, that you have to get it out. And so that if they needed to have that purged out, then we need to make sure that we restore their body kind of after that. That's kind of super important. Yeah, lots of formulas like this. Sometimes with this damp heat, in these acute situations, there can be pain, cramping and pain, right? So if you've ever had gastro, then you'd know it's not a comfortable thing to be cramping and going, oh, I've got to go. And so some formulas kind of work around using a herb called bai shao, which is kind of like a sour herb, and gun chow and things like that kind of help to relax the spasming that happens in the intestines as well. So the person isn't just kind of going like frequently, 10 times a day diarrhea kind of thing. At the end of the day, what Chinese medicine's about is enabling your body to work how it's supposed to. So let's say you have eaten something toxic. That's what I mean by you might need to do a purging thing. Your body is naturally trying to do that anyway. And so we need to kind of support it kind of doing that, not stop it from doing that. But then after that's happened, then we might use herbs to kind of say, well, what's the fallout from that natural process that your body was going through anyway? What's the fallout of that now? And what's your body going through kind of now? And how to support it to do those things. So then you have other formulas that kind of transform water kind of damp. So this is where things get a little bit more on the not so much the acute side, but more the chronic side, where people might have had this for a long time. And I'm sure lots of people probably watching the videos are more the chronic side of things, because they've been like, well, I've had this for years and I still can't get rid of the dampness. What? So the strategies that we kind of use to do this then kind of involve supporting the digestive system to make sure that the spleen and stomach are working properly, so that it doesn't create that damp, that environment. So think about it as the plant, right? So here's a nice little plant that I made the other day. I didn't make it, but I put the soil and put the plants in the soil. That's as good as it gets. And so if I put too much water in this, these won't grow because they'll be what we call waterlogged, right? So there's two things I could do. If there's too much water here, I could put a hole in the bottom so that the water can come out, and that's called draining. And that's what some formulas do. And they drain the dampness. So this formula here that's talked about, formulas that transform water and dampness, the first one that pops up is a common formula that I use called Zhenwu Tang, right? And that formula kind of has two aspects to it. It's got some of those herbs, the baiju, this is the kangju, but it's kind of looks almost the same. That herbs to kind of help the body soak up the damp. So I could put something in here in the soil that soaks up the damp, right? Something dry. Like if I put a dry sponge in there and this was all wet, then the sponge would seep up some of that water. And then I could take that sponge out of here and I could wring it out, right? And so what's happened is I've gotten the water out of the soil, and now I've got the water. So in some cases, your body actually needs that water that's sitting there as dampness. Now, what do we mean by that? Like, so a person might have, they're not urinating properly, or they might be very thirsty, so their body's saying, I need more water. But why do they have all this edema? Why do they have a lot of puffiness in their body? They might say, oh, I'm always bloated, or they've actually got puffy hands or puffy ankles, particularly mostly the ankles and the lower areas of the body. So some of these formulas are really, really complex because they're kind of thinking about the strategy from lots of different ways. And so what this Zhenwu Tang formula has in it as well is herbs that warm the body's yang to help it restore its power, basically its ability. And some of those herbs you could think about as the sun, right? So if I keep this plant here in this dark room all the time and I never put it in the sun, it won't thrive. It won't like that because plants need sun, right? And so human bodies need sun too. We need the yang of the sun. We need that warmth. And so otherwise we get really cold, things get stagnant, things get stuck, and things don't work, they don't function as they should do. So some herbs in Chinese medicine act as if the sunshine, right? It's like putting a little bit of sunshine in your body, and that's restoring that yang, so it's helping the body work properly, or work better, do its job that it's supposed to be doing. And then there's some herbs that kind of with dampness, they might get in there like a sponge and do that. And if this was really, really bad and there was no hole at the bottom, you could pump out the damp, right? So you could get in there with a pump and sort of like, I don't know if you've ever had a flood in your house or some in your office or something like that. It's a horrible thing, right? How do you get all that water out? What do you do with it? And at the same time, sometimes you think, well, shit, we don't want to waste all this water. Like, what a waste. But if it's just left there, if water gets left there and you don't do anything about it, it'll just go stagnant, and then it starts to stink. And that's where you kind of get this analogy of this damp, giving some people with chronic dampness, they have a weird smell about them. They just have a stagnant kind of a stagnant smell, because it's kind of how, or within that water, sometimes their body's very sweaty, and so that kind of sweat has its own odor, and that sort of sticks clammy on the outside of the body. But it's also just a part of that condition where that person's literally got water stuck in their body that's not being transformed as often as it should be, and so then that generates that stagnant water kind of smell. So this isn't every single way that we can treat dampness, or that a practitioner looks at dampness, but this is most of the ways, right? The majority of the methods, right? So we can kind of drain the damp, we can stick the hole in the bottom and get the damp, like let the plug out, basically let the plug of the water out. We can kind of pump out the damp or soak the dampness up with something, or we can put this whole thing out in the sunshine and let that dry. That's sort of considering drying the damp like that. And that sunshine kind of method is really about restoring the yang of your body as well. And so formulas for patients that have had things for a long time are going to be really different to patients that have just got something that's happened right now. So someone who's got gastro and, you know, they've got, you know, cramping in their abdomen and they've eaten something bad, that's a completely different strategy of treating dampness. It's still the same concept of a person that's their spleen is so weak. They might have a condition called spleen qi deficiency or spleen yang deficiency. In a classical sense, we think, well, their earth element isn't strong. It's not able to, which is their spleen and stomach, it's not able to digest food and fluids properly. And so something's going wrong there, and their fluids are overflowing, the fluids are accumulating in their body, not being transformed. And so those kind of warming herbs. Now, there's some herbs that are really, really powerful herbs. You can only go get those herbs from a herbalist. Like, you can't really get those in, you know, you can't get those in over-the-counter formulas. They just don't exist like that. Because if they're not taken properly at the right timing, if they're not prescribed correctly, then they could make you much, much worse, right? Because they're so powerful, they've got the opportunity, or they've got the ability to be really strong. It's like, you know, you don't stand out in the sunshine all day long, because you're gonna burn. Especially someone like me. It's like a pale vampire. But you need some sun. You can't have no sun, right? So it's about having the right dosage of it and at the right timing, so that it's, you know, beneficial to your body. And that's where a Chinese herbalist will be able to help you with that. One of the other common herbs that we use in Chinese medicine is ginger, which helps like your digestive system function better. So it helps your spleen, your earth element work properly. It kind of aids it do that. And there's lots of ways that it does that. You can use fresh ginger to kind of help do that, but also we use dried ginger. So I talked about how you could dry your own kind of chen peat. Well, you can dry ginger, or you can buy dried ginger, and it's just simply the fresh ginger that's been dried. So it's just been dried in the oven is the best way. Again, you could dry it out in the sun if you had a really hot, dry environment to do that in. And that hot kind of, what that does is it makes that ginger go from being sort of warm to hot. That's what its nature is now, really, really warm and hot basically. And it kind of can help to tonify the earth of your body, or the spleen aspect. And that's used in some cases where people have like extreme diarrhea that won't go away, and they're kind of, you know, wouldn't be just used by itself. And this is again another thing, I don't want to make this video too long, but the problem with using herbs at home is as a tea, as a one herb. You know, herbs in Chinese medicine aren't meant to be used as a one-man band situation, right?
Move your body close to mine. Come on, move your body. Come on, move your body.
You can't have someone being the drummer and the singer and the guitarist all at once. Just impossible. It never sounds good, right? You just can't have that. And so herbs need that whole concerto. They need the whole band there. They need the drummer, the singer, the guitarist. You know, sometimes you need a saxophone player. Sometimes you need a clarinet or a trumpet. You might need those special things in there, in that formula. But the formula I'm talking about now is like there's a common formula called Lijong one, which kind of uses the dried ginger aspect, and it also uses a herb, the Baiju herb as well in there. But it's got 2 other herbs in there that kind of help those 2 things work together. And so those 4 things all together kind of work, you know, they work their magic and they do their job as they're intended to do. But if you have one of those herbs by itself, then you don't have the kind of the support of the other thing, and then it's just an annoying noise, right? So you don't just have a drummer drumming his own song. It's just an annoying noise. It might be nice to hear a singer by itself, but it's not enough to kind of fill out the sound, right? And same as just a guitarist. And so when you have these 4 things all together, it's like, wow, that sounds great. That's really perfect. And that's kind of how Chinese herbs work. It's kind of like, you know, you need all of the elements there to kind of make it work properly. So the most common question I get on the channel and, you know, from patients and things like that is, what herbs could I use at home? How could I help myself at home to do this? And there are some things you can do, but the majority of the work is going to be done by these, you know, these formulas that are designed to, you know, do their work properly when they're prescribed right, when they're prescribed at the right time, in the right dosage, at the right, you know, volume of herbs, and the quality of the herbs is all good, and those kinds of things. It's just almost impossible to get these high quality herbs over the counter now. It's just hard. You know, you just can't get that kind of quality that's going to be therapeutic dosage for you. So I hope this video has been useful and helpful to you. And if you are someone that wants to try something at home, the Chen PT is a great thing to try. It's easy to drink. It's you know, just a natural kind of qi moving, and it's going to kind of help promote that like that movement of energy that's needed to stop the dampness kind of stagnating. And it's also got a little bit of that drying damp kind of nature, so it kind of can help with that, and it tastes really nice as well. So I hope you enjoy drinking your Chen Pea tea, or your mandarin peel, or your tangerine peel tea. And if you've got a question about Chinese medicine, pop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you, and I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. Thanks for listening to the Chinese Medicine Podcast. Did you know we're also on TikTok? And you can find shorter videos on Facebook and Instagram that you might like to share with your friends and family. You can also find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and all places where you listen to audio podcasts. I look forward to seeing you again on the next video soon. Okay, it's going to be a video about dampness and the dampness. Another dampness video.